economist at the Resolution Foundation. Dan Tomlinson joins us now. Dan, really good to talk to you this morning. Firstly, how significant are these changes? Because for many workers, the amount of money that goes into their pockets at the end of the month won't really change, will it?
Yeah, so the amount that a worker receives is staying the same. They should get 80% of their usual wages, up to a cap of £2,500 a month. But it is quite significant what's happening today. It's this first stage in the wind down of the furlough scheme. And so far, furlough scheme has been really successful. It's protected millions of workers across the economy, particularly in those sectors that were told to close down by the government in lockdown. It's protected them from losing their jobs. But now the government is starting to wind down the scheme and it's asking employers to contribute a bit of money from today. And then also from next month, it's asking them to pay more. It's going to ask them to pay 10% of salaries. And then from October, it's going to ask them to pay 20%. And that, for some businesses, particularly those who still haven't even been able to open yet in some of those hard hit sectors, will actually be quite challenging. And one of the things that we're pointing out today is that there's a risk of an increase in redundancies from this change to the furlough scheme that's starting today and accelerating over the autumn.
So you think this could inadvertently lead to people losing their jobs and have a detrimental impact on the economy in the long term?
If we look across the economy as a whole, it does make sense for the government to start to ask lots of employers to start to contribute towards the cost of furlough in different sectors. So like accountancy, for example, if people were furloughed there at the height of lockdown and they're still furloughed, it seems right that firms in sectors like that might then be asked to contribute a small amount in order to sort of prove that they still have a job for that person to go back to. That's part of what the government's doing here. It wants to give employers some skin in the game, as it were. But there's lots of parts of the economy, particularly hospitality, leisure and some parts of retail that have struggled to open up, even when they've been allowed to by the government. And then there's even more parts today that we know have been delayed in terms of when they can open up. And those sectors, we think maybe around 1 million people are still furloughed in hospitality and leisure, and 4 in 10 employees are still furloughed in those parts of the economy. And so the cost for those businesses of now having to contribute to the furlough scheme will be more significant than in the economy at large. And so we're saying actually the government could go slower in terms of the wind down of the scheme for those sectors in order to limit the amount of redundancies that we're going to see in the months ahead.
But how long can the furlough scheme go on for? We've heard from the Chancellor time and again saying that it weighs heavily on him, but he can't save every single job. The reality is many businesses won't survive because of the downturn.
The plan was, I guess, that from today, all of the economy pretty much would be opened up. And then at that time, the government would ask businesses to start to contribute. But we've already seen, both nationally in terms of some businesses like bowling alleys and casinos not being able to open up, and also in local areas in Leicester and now, but to a lesser extent, but potentially building in Manchester in terms of a slower pace of unlocking us from the lockdown. And that's where the government should be considering really carefully now, and I'm sure they are, the politicians and the civil servants thinking carefully about whether, if there's a change in the pace of the unwinding of the economic restrictions, whether there should also be a change in the pace of the unwinding of the economic support for firms and for individuals. Because this is a really big shock to people's living standards. And lots of people's jobs will be affected as this scheme winds down. But I totally accept that this scheme can't continue forever. A delay of maybe 2 or 3 months for those hardest hit sectors would seem sensible. But at some point, yes, the job retention scheme will have to be phased out. But it doesn't seem like today is the right time for every business across the whole economy.
How many people are now back at work? A couple of months ago, the start of June, it was 8.9 million. Has that changed?
Yeah, and so we have been looking closely at the data, and we think actually now more than half of the people who have been on the job retention scheme at some point since it was launched in March have now returned to work. And that's really good news, and it does bring home how important this policy was. We had lots of businesses having to shut down back in March and April and May, and rather than have to lay off their workers, they were able to keep them on the books. The government was paying the cost of their wages. So now lots of people have returned to work as the economy has started to reopen, but there are still those parts of the economy like hospitality, like leisure and tourism, where things are particularly difficult and where there's still lots of people on relatively low pay. We're protecting their incomes at the moment and not pushing them into unemployment from firms being have to pay more towards the cost of furlough would seem like a sensible thing for the government to do.
Yeah, let's hope things improve. Dan Tomlinson from the Resolution Foundation, really good to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you.